my husband poured hot soup over my head and screamed, "You've got 10 minutes to leave." I started laughing. Because in that moment, covered in tomato bisque with witnesses watching, he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. See, what Daniel didn't know was that 10 minutes earlier, I had inherited his father's $38 million fortune. The house he was throwing me out of? It was mine. The family who tortured me for 15 years? They were about to lose everything. And that soup dripping down my face? That wasn't my humiliation. It was his. This is the true story of how I went from being a woman with nothing to the woman who took it all back. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you've ever felt trapped by someone who made you feel worthless, hit that like button. Subscribe because part 2 gets even crazier. Share this with someone who needs to hear that escape is possible. My name is Eleanor, and this is how I survived 15 years of hell and came out on top. My name is Eleanor, and I need to tell you something important. Sometimes the prettiest boxes contain the ugliest surprises. I learned that the hard way. I met Daniel at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. He wore an expensive suit and had a smile that made my heart jump. He bought my coffee, asked about my work as a teacher, and listened like every word I said was pure gold. For 3 months he was perfect. Flowers every Friday. Long walks in the park. He told me I was beautiful, smart, and special. When he proposed on a beach at sunset, I cried happy tears. I thought I had won the lottery of life. The wedding was huge and fancy. Daniel's family had money, the kind of money that makes people stare. His mother, Margaret, wore a white dress to my wedding. Yes, white. The same color as my dress. When I saw her, my stomach twisted, but Daniel just laughed and said, "That's just mom being mom." I should have run right then. But I didn't know how to read the warning signs yet. After the honeymoon, Daniel said we would live in his family's mansion. Just until we find our own place, he promised. The mansion was enormous, with marble floors and paintings worth more than cars. Margaret lived there too, along with Daniel's father, Richard, and Daniel's 2 brothers, Marcus and James. "Welcome to the family," Margaret said when we arrived. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We have rules here, Eleanor. I hope Daniel explained them to you." He hadn't. The rules started small. Dinner was at 7 o'clock sharp every Sunday. Everyone had to attend. No excuses. Margaret sat at the head of the table like a queen, and Richard sat at the other end, quiet as a ghost. Daniel and his brothers sat on one side. I sat alone on the other. The first Sunday dinner, Margaret looked at the chicken I brought. "What is this?" she asked, poking it with her fork. "Roasted chicken with herbs," I said, trying to sound confident. "It's my grandmother's recipe." Margaret laughed. Not a happy laugh. A cold, mean laugh that made everyone else at the table look down. "Your grandmother must have hated cooking. This tastes like cardboard." "Daniel, did you marry a woman who can't even roast a chicken?" My face burned hot. Daniel said nothing. He just kept eating, like his mother hadn't just insulted me in front of everyone. Marcus and James snickered into their napkins. Only Richard looked at me with something like kindness in his eyes, but he didn't speak either. That was just the beginning. Every Sunday, Margaret found something wrong with me. My hair was too messy. My dress was too cheap. My laugh was too loud. My voice was too soft. Week after week, she threw little knives made of words, and they all stuck in my heart. "Eleanor, dear," she would say in that sweet, poisonous voice, "perhaps you should take some cooking classes. Or fashion classes. Or classes on how to be a proper wife. You clearly need help." I started to dread Sundays. I would wake up with my stomach in knots, knowing that in a few hours, I would sit at that table and be torn apart piece by piece. I begged Daniel to let us skip dinner. Just once. "We can't disappoint Mother," he said. "Family is everything." But what about me? Wasn't I family now too? 6 months after the wedding, Daniel said I should quit my teaching job. "You don't need to work," he said. "I make plenty of money. Besides, Mother needs help around the house." I loved teaching. I loved my students and the way their faces lit up when they finally understood something hard. But Daniel kept pushing. He said I was being selfish. He said real wives supported their husbands by taking care of the home. He said I was embarrassing him by insisting on working like we were poor. So I quit. And the moment I did, the trap closed around me. Margaret gave me a list of chores every morning. Scrub the floors. Polish the silver. Wash the windows. Cook the meals. I became a maid in a mansion that wasn't even mine. Daniel gave me a small allowance for groceries, but I had to show him receipts for every penny I spent. My own money, the money I had saved from teaching, slowly disappeared as I used it for things Daniel said he couldn't afford. "I'm having some business troubles," he told me. "Just help me out for a few months." A few months turned into a year. Then 2 years. Then 5. My friends stopped calling because I could never meet them. Margaret always needed something done right when I was about to leave the house. My parents lived far away, and Daniel said we couldn't afford plane tickets to visit them. I felt like I was disappearing, becoming smaller and smaller, until I was almost invisible. But someone was watching. Richard, Daniel's father, sat in his leather chair in the corner of the living room every evening, reading his newspaper. He never said much, but his eyes followed me. When Margaret was especially cruel, I would catch him shaking his head slightly. When I brought him his tea, he would nod at me and whisper, "Thank you, Eleanor. You're very kind." Those small words kept me alive. 10 years passed. Then 12. Then 15. I was 40 years old and had nothing. No job. No money. No friends. No escape. The Sunday dinners got worse. Margaret started criticizing me in front of guests, making jokes about how Daniel had married down, and how unfortunate it was that we never had children. "Probably for the best," she would say. "Eleanor wouldn't know how to raise them properly anyway." Daniel never defended me. Not once in 15 years. He just sat there, eating his food, drinking his wine, acting like I wasn't being destroyed right in front of him. I thought about leaving 1,000 times. But where would I go? I had no money. No job history for 15 years. No car in my name. Nothing. Margaret made sure I knew it too. "You should be grateful," she told me one Sunday after dinner. "Without this family, you'd be nothing. You'd be homeless. Remember that." I went to bed that night and cried into my pillow so hard I thought I might break. I felt like a prisoner in a beautiful cage. And I couldn't see any way out. But Richard was planning something. Something that would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. Everything changed on a Wednesday afternoon when I found the envelope. I was cleaning Daniel's office, dusting the bookshelves like Margaret had ordered me to do. A paper fell from behind some books. It was a letter from a bank I had never heard of. I picked it up and my hands started shaking as I read it. "Final notice. Your account is overdrawn by $47,000. Immediate payment required." $47,000? How could Daniel owe that much money? He always said we were comfortable, that his business was doing well. My heart pounded in my chest. I kept searching and found more papers hidden in the back of his desk drawer. Casino receipts. Betting slips. Loan documents with Daniel's signature. Daniel was gambling. He had been gambling for years. And he was losing everything. I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by evidence of lies, feeling sick to my stomach. But then I found something even worse. Documents with my signature on them. Loan applications I never signed. Credit cards I never opened. My name was on papers I had never seen before. He had been forging my signature. Using my name to borrow money. Making me responsible for his debts without me even knowing. That night at dinner, I watched Daniel laugh and joke with his brothers like nothing was wrong. I looked at Margaret, who was talking about how important family reputation was. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. They all knew. They had to know. Margaret controlled everything in this house. She knew where every penny went. She knew Daniel was destroying us, and she didn't care. Maybe she even encouraged it, because it kept me trapped. After dinner, Richard asked me to bring him his medicine in his study. I did like always. But this time, when I handed him the glass of water, he spoke in a voice that was stronger than I had ever heard. "Close the door, Eleanor. We need to talk." I closed the door, my heart racing. Richard pointed to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down," he said gently. "I know you found the papers today. I saw you come out of Daniel's office with tears in your eyes." My mouth fell open. You knew." "I've known for a long time," Richard said, and his face looked tired and sad. About the gambling. About the forgery. About everything Margaret has done to you. I've watched it all, and I'm ashamed to say I stayed quiet for too long. Why? I whispered. Why didn't you stop them? Richard leaned forward, and I saw tears in his eyes. Because I was a coward, Eleanor. Margaret is a strong, cruel woman, and I let her run this family while I hid in my study. But I'm dying now. The doctors give me maybe 6 months. And before I go, I need to make things right. I felt tears running down my face. I don't understand. This fortune, this mansion, everything you see here, it's not Margaret's. It's mine. I built the business. I earned the money. And I get to decide where it goes when I die. Richard pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. I've been working with my lawyer, David Sterling. A good man. Someone you can trust. We've been preparing for this moment for 2 years. He slid the folder across the desk to me. Everything is going to you, Eleanor. The house. The business. The investments. All of it. $38 million. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. What? No. That can't. Why would you? Because you're the only good person in this family, Richard said, and his voice cracked with emotion. For 15 years, I've watched you be kind when they were cruel. I've watched you work without complaint. I've watched you bring me tea with a smile even after Margaret spent an hour tearing you apart. You're the daughter I wish I had, Eleanor. You deserve this. I was crying so hard I could barely speak. But Margaret, Daniel, they'll fight this. They'll say I tricked you or... They can try, Richard said with a small smile. But David is very good at his job. We've prepared everything. Medical evaluations proving I'm completely sound of mind. Video recordings of me explaining my wishes. Psychiatric reports. Legal documents that would take an army of lawyers years to break. And I've left detailed notes about Daniel's crimes, Margaret's abuse, all of it. If they try to contest the will, everything goes public. He reached across the desk and took my hand. Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. You are not worthless. You are not stupid. You are not lucky to be here. You are a smart, capable, beautiful woman who has been beaten down by people who were afraid of your strength. Those words broke something open inside me. I sobbed, really sobbed, for the first time in years. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the fear came pouring out. I feel so trapped, I cried. I have nothing. I am nothing. No, Richard said firmly. You have everything. You just can't see it yet. But you will. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next hour, Richard laid out a plan. I would start secretly rebuilding my life. I would use the small allowance Daniel gave me to open my own bank account at a different bank. I would reach out to my old school and see about substitute teaching, just 1 or 2 days a week when Margaret thought I was running errands. I would document every insult, every manipulation, every moment of abuse. I would take pictures of Daniel's gambling receipts and the forged documents. I would build a case, piece by piece, until the day Richard died and the will was read. It won't be easy, Richard warned me. You'll have to pretend everything is normal. You'll have to sit through those dinners and bite your tongue. But every day, you'll be getting stronger. And when the time comes, you'll be ready. How long? I asked. I don't know, Richard said honestly. Maybe 6 months. Maybe less. But Eleanor, I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone and you have the power, don't let guilt make you weak. Don't let them manipulate you into giving them anything. They don't deserve your mercy. Promise me. I looked into his kind, tired eyes. I promise. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel who was snoring after too much wine, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. The next morning, I started my secret life. I opened a bank account at a small branch across town, using my grandmother's maiden name. I bought a cheap phone with cash and hid it in a box of tampons under the bathroom sink where Daniel would never look. I called my old school and talked to the principal, who remembered me and said she would love to have me back as a substitute teacher. Life got complicated, I told her. But I'm ready to come back now. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Welcome home, Eleanor." I started teaching 2 days a week. I told Margaret I was volunteering at a charity. She didn't care enough to check. The first time I stood in front of a classroom again, I almost cried. I had forgotten what it felt like to be respected, to be needed, to be valued. Every night, I documented everything. I took pictures of the loan papers with my phone. I recorded Margaret's insults on voice memos. I wrote down dates and times and exact words. I built a mountain of evidence. 4 months passed. Richard got weaker. I spent more time taking care of him, bringing him meals, reading to him, sitting with him. Margaret complained that I was neglecting my other duties, but Richard insisted he wanted me there. One afternoon, Richard asked me to help him to the window. He looked out at the garden and said, "Eleanor, I need to tell you something else. About Daniel." My stomach dropped. What? He's having an affair. Her name is Brittany. She works at the casino. I hired a private investigator last month to confirm it. Richard handed me another folder. Pictures, hotel receipts, text messages. Everything you'll need. I opened the folder and saw Daniel with a young blonde woman. They were kissing. They were holding hands. They looked happy. I thought I would feel devastated. But instead, I felt relief. This was the final piece. The final nail in the coffin. Daniel wasn't just a liar and a thief and a coward. He was a cheater too. Good, I said, and Richard smiled sadly. Good indeed, he said. 2 months later, on a cold Tuesday morning, Richard passed away in his sleep. I was the one who found him. I sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, crying for the only person in this house who had ever shown me kindness. The funeral was big and expensive. Margaret wore black and cried dramatic tears. Daniel looked tired and worried. Marcus and James stood like statues. I wore a simple dress and said goodbye to my friend, my ally, my savior. 3 days after the funeral, we all gathered in David Sterling's office for the reading of the will. Margaret sat in the biggest chair like a queen about to receive her crown. Daniel sat next to her, already counting his inheritance in his head. Marcus and James looked bored. I sat in the corner, quiet and invisible, like always. David Sterling opened the folder and began to read. And Margaret's face went white. Everything was about to change. David Sterling's voice filled the office as he read Richard's will. With every word, Margaret's face got whiter and Daniel's hands gripped the armrests of his chair tighter. To my wife, Margaret Thompson, I leave $1, in recognition of the cruelty and manipulation she has inflicted upon this family for 30 years. Margaret gasped. What? This is insane. Richard was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. David continued without stopping. To my sons, Daniel, Marcus, and James Thompson, I leave $1 each, for enabling abuse and failing to show basic human decency. Daniel stood up. This is ridiculous. Dad wouldn't do this. Eleanor, she must have poisoned his mind, Sit down, Mr. Thompson, David said coldly. I have 17 hours of video testimony from your father, recorded over 6 months, with 3 independent psychiatrists confirming his complete mental competency. If you wish to contest this will, I should inform you that your father also left detailed documentation of your criminal activities, which will become public record in any legal challenge. Daniel sat down fast, his face red. David looked directly at me. To Eleanor Thompson, who showed kindness when others showed cruelty, who maintained dignity when others sought to destroy it, who proved herself worthy of trust and respect, I leave my entire estate. The mansion and all properties. The business and all investments. All bank accounts and assets. Approximately $38 million. Additionally, I leave her complete authority to decide what, if anything, any member of this family receives. The room exploded. Margaret was screaming. Daniel was yelling about lawyers. Marcus and James were arguing with each other. I sat perfectly still, feeling the weight of Richard's gift, his trust, his love. There's more, David said loudly, silencing the room. Richard also left instructions. The family has 30 days to vacate the mansion. Any legal challenge will result in immediate prosecution for Daniel's forgery crimes and public release of all documented abuse. He has prepared everything, and I am authorized to execute his wishes fully. Margaret turned to me with pure hate in her eyes. You little thief. You manipulated a dying old man. You're nothing but a gold-digging Careful, Mrs. Thompson, David interrupted. Eleanor now owns the roof over your head. I suggest you speak respectfully. I found my voice. It was steady and strong. I'll give you all 60 days instead of 30. But after that, you need to leave. I walked out of that office with David beside me, leaving them screaming behind us. For the first time in 15 years I had power. Real power. And I was just getting started. The next month was chaos. Margaret hired 3 lawyers, but David destroyed every argument they made. Marcus and James moved out quickly, wanting nothing to do with the drama. Daniel stayed, growing more desperate and angry every day. He tried to sweet-talk me, then threaten me, then beg me. I documented everything. I also did something else. I hired my own investigator to dig deeper into Daniel's life. What we found was worse than I imagined. He owed money to dangerous people. He had drained his brother's trust funds. He had stolen from the business. And Brittany, his girlfriend, was pregnant. 6 weeks after Richard's death, I decided it was time to end this. I planned one final Sunday dinner. I invited everyone, including David Sterling and a court reporter. I told Margaret it was to discuss arrangements. Margaret couldn't resist one last chance to feel powerful. She showed up in an expensive dress, her hair perfect, ready to put me in my place one more time. I made soup. Margaret's favorite. Tomato bisque. Everyone sat at the table. Margaret at one end, where she always sat. Me at the other end, where Richard used to sit. Daniel beside his mother. David and the court reporter off to the side. Quiet and official. Well, Eleanor, Margaret said with that cruel smile. Have you come to your senses? Are you ready to stop this foolishness and give this family what rightfully belongs to us? I looked at her calmly. No, Margaret. I'm here to give you what you actually deserve. I nodded to David. He opened his briefcase and pulled out folders. Lots of folders. Let's start with you, Daniel, I said. My voice was clear and strong. You've been gambling for 12 years. You've lost over $600,000 of family money. You forged my signature on 18 different loan applications. You stole from your own father's business accounts. You're having an affair with Brittany Mason, who is currently 3 months pregnant with your child. And you owe dangerous people money that you can't pay back. I slid photos across the table. Daniel's face went from red to gray. And Margaret, I continued, turning to her. You've spent 15 years emotionally abusing me. Humiliating me. Breaking me down piece by piece. Richard documented everything. Every cruel word. Every manipulation. Every time you made me feel worthless. It's all here, recorded and witnessed. Margaret's mouth opened but no sound came out. I stayed quiet all these years because I thought I had no choice, I said, and now emotion was creeping into my voice. I thought I was trapped. I thought I deserved the way you treated me. But Richard showed me the truth. I didn't deserve any of it. Not one single moment of your cruelty. Daniel suddenly stood up and grabbed his bowl of soup. Before anyone could stop him, he poured it over my head. The hot liquid ran down my face, my hair, my clothes. You've got 10 minutes to pack your things and leave, he screamed. 10 minutes. Get out of my house. I sat there, soup dripping from my hair, and I started laughing. Really laughing. The court reporter was writing everything down. David was already on his phone, calling the police. Your house, I said, wiping soup from my eyes. Daniel, you don't own anything anymore. This is my house. And you just assaulted me in front of witnesses. I stood up, soup still dripping from my clothes, and I felt powerful. Truly powerful. You're right about one thing though. 10 minutes. You and Margaret have 10 minutes to take whatever you can carry and leave. The locks will be changed in 11 minutes. If you're still here, the police will remove you. David has already filed restraining orders. Margaret finally found her voice. You can't do this. We have rights. We have. You have nothing, I said quietly. Nothing but the consequences of your own actions. For 15 years, you told me I was worthless. You told me I should be grateful. You told me I was nothing without this family. But the truth is, you were nothing without Richard's money. And now it's mine. Daniel lunged at me, But David and the court reporter stepped between us. The police arrived moments later. They had been waiting outside, ready. I watched from the window as Margaret and Daniel were escorted from the house, carrying small bags of belongings. Margaret was crying, her makeup running down her face. Daniel was shouting threats that everyone ignored. The doors closed behind them. The locks clicked. And for the first time in 15 years, the mansion was quiet and peaceful. The next months were a whirlwind. Daniel was arrested for forgery and fraud. He lost his business license and went to trial. Margaret lost all her social standing when the abuse documentation went public. Their wealthy friends abandoned them one by one. Marcus and James apologized to me, admitting they had been afraid of their mother their whole lives. I settled the lawsuits quickly. I gave them each enough money to start over, but nothing close to what they wanted. Daniel got help for his gambling addiction in prison. Margaret moved to a small apartment across town. I heard she got a job for the first time in her life. But I didn't spend my time thinking about them. I had work to do. I started the Richard Thompson Foundation for Abuse Survivors. We help people who are trapped like I was. We provide legal aid to fight abusive partners. We offer housing for people who have nowhere to go. We give job training for people who lost their careers. We pay for therapy for people who need to heal. I went back to teaching full-time. I bought a smaller, warmer house near the school. I reconnected with my parents and my old friends. I started painting again, something I loved as a child but had forgotten. I traveled to places I had only dreamed about. I lived. Every year on Richard's birthday, I visit his grave and thank him. Thank him for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank him for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank him for giving me not just money, but something more valuable. The truth about my own worth. People ask me if I feel guilty. If I think about Margaret and Daniel and wonder if I was too harsh. The answer is no. Guilt is what abusers use to keep you trapped. Guilt is what makes you think you deserve the pain they give you. I don't feel guilty for protecting myself. I don't feel guilty for seeking justice. I don't feel guilty for building a life where I'm respected and free. I think about the woman I was 15 years ago, sitting at that table, letting Margaret tear me apart while I said nothing. I want to go back and hug her and tell her it gets better. Tell her she's stronger than she knows. Tell her to start planning her escape right now, today, this very moment. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only go forward. So I'm telling you this story instead. If you're reading this and you feel trapped, if someone is breaking you down piece by piece, if you think you have no way out, I want you to know something. You are not worthless. You are not stupid. You are not lucky to be there. You are valuable and strong and deserving of respect. The voice in your head that says you deserve the abuse? That's not your voice. That's their voice. And it's lying. Start planning. Start documenting. Start reaching out. Find your ally, even if it's just one person. Open a secret bank account. Keep evidence. Build your escape plan one small step at a time. It might take months or years, but every step toward freedom matters. And when you finally break free, when you finally stand up and say, no more, you'll discover something amazing. The power was always inside you. You just couldn't see it yet. They took 15 years from me. But they didn't take everything. They didn't take my kindness. They didn't take my strength. They didn't take my future. And they didn't take my voice. I'm Eleanor Thompson. I survived coercive control, financial abuse, and 15 years of cruelty. I fought back, I won, and now I help others do the same. If you're trapped, please don't wait as long as I did. Reach out. Call a domestic violence hotline. Talk to someone you trust. Look into legal aid. Check if there are resources in your community. The Richard Thompson Foundation is real, and there are organizations like it everywhere, ready to help. Your life is precious. Your freedom is possible. Your future is waiting. All you have to do is take the first step. And remember, the soup on my head wasn't my shame. It was his. The humiliation wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. You don't have to carry it either. Put it down. Walk away. Build something beautiful. I did. And so can you.